Kira Okonkwo had 13 seconds before the man in her employer's study decided whether to kill her. She knew this because she'd timed him. 3 months of cleaning Dante Marcello's penthouse had taught her that when he went silent, truly silent, not the performative kind, someone was about to bleed. The marble floors would need scrubbing after. She'd done it twice before. Her hands were wrist-deep in scalding water, washing crystal that cost more than her fabricated yearly salary. The kitchen's industrial silence pressed against her eardrums. Behind her, Dante's reflection materialized in the window above the sink, like smoke taking human form. He didn't speak. Men like Dante Marcello didn't need to. Kira's pulse hammered a countdown against her throat, but her hands stayed steady. That's what maids did. They maintained rhythm even when the world fractured around them. But Delta Force operatives? They mapped exit velocities while their fingers scrubbed wine stains from Waterford crystal. 3 exits, 2 armed guards blocking the service elevator, Dante himself blocking the kitchen threshold, 6'3" of controlled violence in a Tom Ford suit that probably cost $8,000. The scar bisecting his left eyebrow was the only imperfection, a souvenir from Mogadishu that most people were too terrified to ask about. Kira had read his military file. She knew exactly where he'd gotten it. "Friday night," Dante said. His voice was smoke and gravel, the kind that made boardrooms go quiet and enemies reconsider their life choices. "The Castellano-Volkov wedding. You're coming with me." Not a question, not a request. Kira's fingers tightened around the crystal stem. The glass should have shattered. It didn't. She forced herself to turn slowly, water cascading from her hands onto the heated marble floors that were radiant heated to exactly 72 degrees. "Sir?" Her voice came out textured with the right amount of confusion, meek, uncertain. Everything Dante expected from the Ugandan refugee woman he'd hired through a third-party agency that definitely wasn't CIA front. "You heard me." He moved into the kitchen, his gait predatory and economical, every step calculated. "The Castellano girl is marrying Volkov's nephew. Every crime family from Boston to Miami will be there. You'll be on my arm when I walk through those doors." Kira's mind was already 3 moves ahead. The Castellano-Volkov wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a geopolitical summit for the East Coast underworld. FBI had a task force. Interpol had surveillance satellites pointed at the venue. And she had her own reasons for wanting inside that ballroom, reasons that had nothing to do with her government and everything to do with blood. But walking in as Dante Marcello's date wasn't infiltration. It was suicide, with a side of public humiliation. "I don't understand, Mr. Marcello." She set the glass down with deliberate care. "Surely you have someone more appropriate." "Appropriate?" The word was a blade wrapped in velvet. "I'm bringing a house cleaner to the wedding of the century. There's nothing appropriate about it. That's the point." Behind him, his second-in-command materialized. Felix Kozlov, former Spetsnaz, current Shadow, Dante's most trusted weapon. His ice-blue eyes assessed Kira with the clinical detachment of a man who'd killed in 17 countries. "Boss," Felix said, his Russian accent thick as winter. "The Castellanos will interpret this as direct provocation. Enzo will retaliate." "Let him try." Dante's smile was surgical. "I want him angry. Angry men make mistakes." Kira's stomach dropped. She was bait. A calculated insult designed to trigger a war. But what Dante didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that she needed that chaos. She needed the moment when security would fracture and attention would splinter. She needed access to one man who would be at that wedding. Luca, the accountant Teresi, the money man who knew where they'd taken her brother. The kitchen door flew open with enough force to crack the doorstop. Isabella Marcello swept in, all silver hair and Italian fury, wrapped in a Chanel robe that cost more than most cars. Dante's grandmother, the matriarch who'd raised him after his parents were murdered in a Sicilian vineyard when he was 9. The only person alive who could challenge him without consequence. Dante Salvatore Marcello. His full name was a weapon in her mouth. "Tell me you haven't lost your mind." She spotted Kira and froze, her dark eyes going wide. "Madonna mia, no, absolutely not. You cannot bring staff to the Castellano wedding." The insult would be calculated, Dante finished, his voice cold as January wind off the Hudson. Everything I do is calculated, nonna. Isabella's face hardened into the expression that had terrified Mafia dons for 40 years. This will start a war. Yes, Dante said simply. It will. The certainty in his voice sent ice crystallizing down Kira's spine. He wasn't reckless, wasn't emotional. He was planning something bigger, something she couldn't see yet. And she was a chess piece in a game whose rules she didn't fully understand. Isabella turned to Kira, and her expression shifted to something that looked almost like pity. "Child," she said, her accent softening, "do you understand what he's asking of you?" Kira met her gaze, let her see the fear that was only partially performance. "I'm beginning to, ma'am." "Then refuse. Walk away. There are other jobs, safer jobs." "She won't refuse." Dante's voice was too quiet, dangerously quiet. "Will you, Kira?" It wasn't a question. It was a test with lethal consequences for the wrong answer. Kira looked at him directly, cataloging details, the silver threading through his black hair at the temples, the way his hands never quite relaxed, the slight bulge beneath his left arm where his Sig Sauer P226 rested. "No, Mr. Marcello, I won't refuse." Isabella shook her head, slowly. "You're playing with forces beyond your control, Nipote, both of you." She looked at Kira one more time, her expression shifting to something almost knowing. "Be careful, girl. My grandson collects broken things, and he never lets them go." She left, her warning hanging in the air like cordite. Felix stayed, arms crossed over his chest. "Boss, if this goes sideways—" "It won't." "How can you be certain?" Dante's eyes never left Kira. "Because she's smarter than she pretends. Aren't you, Kira?" Her blood turned to slush. Did he know? Had she made a mistake somewhere? Left a digital footprint? Blown her cover during one of the midnight searches through his encrypted files? "I don't know what you mean, sir." Her voice was steady. Thank God for her voice. He moved closer. Close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something custom, probably blended in Florence, notes of tobacco and cedar and controlled violence. Close enough that she could see the exact shade of his eyes, not brown, but amber shot through with gold. "You've worked in my home for 3 months, he said softly. "You've never asked for a raise, never complained, never tried to steal from me, seduce me, or leverage your position." He tilted his head, studying her like she was the equation he was solving in real time. "In my world, that makes you either extraordinarily boring or extraordinarily disciplined." Her heart was a war drum against her ribs. "I'm just trying to keep my job, Mr. Marcello." "Perhaps." The word was barely a whisper. "But Friday night, you'll be the most valuable piece on the board, whether you know it or not." He stepped back, the moment shattering like the crystal she'd almost broken. 6 a.m. Friday. A car will take you to get prepared. Don't bring anything from your quarters. Don't contact anyone. Don't leave this building before the car arrives." He paused at the threshold. "And Kira, whatever happens Friday night, you follow my lead. No matter what you see, no matter what you think you understand, you stay silent, you stay close, and you trust that I have a plan." He walked out. Felix lingered, his expression unreadable. "He suspects something," Felix said quietly in Russian. He didn't know Kira was fluent. "Not what exactly, but he knows you're not just a maid." He switched to English. "Be careful, Friday. Dante's plans have a way of burning everyone involved." Then he was gone too. Kira stood alone in the massive kitchen, water still dripping from her hands onto floors that cost $200 per square foot. She moved on autopilot to the staff lockers, her training overriding the adrenaline crash. Assess, adapt, survive. She pulled out the small waterproof pouch hidden in the lining of her spare uniform. Inside, a micro SD card containing 4 years of reconnaissance, a photograph that was disintegrating at the edges, and a burner phone with 3 contacts. Her hands trembled as she looked at Jamal's picture, her baby brother, 14, in this photo, grinning in his high school soccer uniform at their father's funeral. 6 weeks after this photo was taken, Jamal disappeared, trafficked by a network that fed directly into the Castellano family's operations. For 4 years, Kira had hunted, Delta forced a Defense Intelligence Agency to going completely rogue when the agency prioritized strategic assets over one missing black boy from Baltimore. She'd tracked the network across 8 countries through shell companies registered in tax havens, following digital breadcrumbs that all pointed to one man, Luca the accountant Teresi. Luca ran the Castellanos human trafficking operations with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. Children moved like inventory, money laundered through legitimate businesses, protection bought at the highest levels of government. For 3 years, Kira couldn't get close. Luca was too careful, too protected. Then she'd discovered the connection. Dante Marcello's legitimate import-export business occasionally moved shipments for the Castellanos, a partnership of convenience between new money and old blood. 3 months ago, she'd applied for a housekeeping position in Dante's household, a way to monitor the relationship, to identify when shipments moved, to find the pattern that would lead her to Luca. And now, impossibly, Dante was handing her exactly what she needed, access to Luca at the wedding. But why? What did Dante really want? She pressed the photograph against her chest, breathing slowly. 48 hours, one wedding, one chance. The answer, she suspected, was going to cost more than she'd planned to pay. If you're feeling this story, drop a like and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. It genuinely makes my day to see our community grow across the world. And hit that subscribe button, because what happens at that wedding? You won't believe it. The transformation suite existed in a dimension Kira hadn't known was part of Dante's empire, not the penthouse. Not the warehouse district where his legitimate operations hummed 24 hours a day. This was a private floor in the Apex Tower, a luxury hotel Dante owned through a Cayman Island shell corporation, accessed through a private elevator that required retinal scan, thumbprint, and a 16-digit code that changed every 6 hours. The space was designed to erase identities and create new ones. Walls the color of bleached bone, lighting so perfectly diffused it seemed to emanate from the air itself. The temperature was precisely 68 degrees. Not a single surface reflected sound. Standing in the center of the room felt like being suspended in expensive nothing. Kira stood in her maid's uniform, black polyester that had become a second skin over 3 months, while a woman circled her like a hawk studying prey. Naomi Okafor, Nigerian, late 50s, hands that moved with surgical precision. She'd been transforming people for Dante for 12 years, according to the dossier Kira had compiled. Before that, she'd worked for Mossad's identity division. Before that, somewhere in Lagos that official records refused to acknowledge. "Remove it," Naomi said. Her accent was British-educated overlaying Yoruba roots. Clinical, detached. Everything. Kira obeyed, peeling away the uniform that had been her camouflage. Underneath, she wore compression garments. Nothing seductive, nothing memorable. The kind of underwear designed for function, not fantasy. Naomi's eyes traveled across Kira's exposed skin, cataloging scars with professional interest. A knife wound on her ribs from Karachi, bullet graze on her left shoulder from Budapest, the burn scar on her right thigh from Lagos that she'd gotten pulling civilians out of a marketplace bombing. Military, Naomi said. Not a question. Special operations, multiple theaters. Her eyes met Kira's. Delta, I'd guess. Maybe SAD. She meant Special Activities Division, CIA's paramilitary arm. Kira didn't answer, didn't need to. Naomi simply nodded and gestured toward a chair positioned before floor-to-ceiling mirrors that made Kira see herself from every angle simultaneously. Sit. We have 4 hours to turn you into someone who belongs at that wedding. For the next 3 hours and 42 minutes, Kira was dismantled and rebuilt. Hands worked through her hair, natural, tight coils she'd been keeping in a conservative bun for 3 months. Naomi's assistant, a silent Japanese woman named Yuki, washed it with products that smelled like jasmine and cost more per ounce than cocaine. Then came the chemical straightening treatment, heat, tension, transformation. When Yuki finished, Kira's hair fell in sleek, bone-straight sheets to her shoulders, shimmering like black water under the lights. "Now you look expensive," Naomi observed, studying Kira's reflection. "Good. The Castellanos respect. Expensive." Makeup came next. foundation 3 shades darker than Kira's actual complexion, to emphasize rather than minimize her blackness, Naomi explained. Dante wants them to see exactly what you are, what you represent, the future they're terrified of. Deep plum eyeshadow that made Kira's dark eyes look dangerous instead of submissive. Highlighter on her cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. Lips painted the color of dried blood, a custom shade Naomi mixed herself. "You're a weapon," Naomi said quietly, working on Kira's lips with a brush that probably cost $200. "He's dressing you like one." Then came the dress. Naomi wheeled it out on a mannequin, and Kira's breath stopped despite 4 years of combat training that should have made her immune to surprise. Emerald green silk, not black like the competitor's story. Dante was too smart for obvious symbolism. This was the green of money, of envy, of poison that tasted sweet going down. The fabric caught light like liquid gemstones. The cut was architectural, one shoulder design that left her right shoulder bare, exposed, a neckline that plunged in a sharp V to her sternum. The bodice was structured like armor, boned and fitted to her exact measurements. The skirt fell in liquid panels to the floor, but a slit climbed her left thigh to mid-hip, revealing leg with every step. "He had this made 3 weeks ago," Naomi said, watching Kira's face. "Sent your measurements to a designer in Milan. She worked on nothing else." She paused. "He's been planning this longer than you know." Kira's stomach twisted. 3 weeks ago was before she'd uncovered the shipping connection to Luca, before she'd found the pattern, which meant Dante had been watching her, planning this since when? Since she'd started working for him. Since before. "How much does he know about me?" Kira asked. Naomi's expression was unreadable. "Enough to be dangerous, not enough to stop you." She gestured toward the changing screen. "Put it on. Let's see if his vision matches reality." The silk felt like cold water against Kira's skin, like sin woven into fabric, like wearing a target that cost $50,000. When she emerged, Naomi's professional mask cracked into something almost like approval. "Yes, you'll do more than insult them. You'll make them afraid." The door opened without warning. Dante entered the suite like he owned the oxygen. Probably did. This was his building, his floor, his kingdom. He was dressed in a tuxedo that made the one he'd worn earlier look like practice. Midnight blue so dark it was almost black, cut by a tailor who understood that clothes were weapons. His shirt was crisp white, open at the collar, no tie. The scar on his eyebrow caught the light. His eyes traveled across Kira slowly, methodically, the way a general surveys a battlefield before committing troops. He didn't speak. The silence was louder than applause. He circled her once, footsteps silent on marble. When he stood behind her, she could feel the heat radiating from his body through the thin silk. His breath was warm against her bare shoulder. "Perfect," he finally said. The word was soft, reverent, and it sent warning signals down her spine. Naomi left without being dismissed. Yuki followed. The door locked with a quiet click. They were alone. Dante moved to stand in front of her, his eyes never leaving hers in the mirror's reflection. "What do you see when you look at yourself, Kira?" She met his gaze in the glass. A woman playing a role. Close. He stepped nearer, his presence overwhelming every other sensory input. "You see a weapon. That's what you've been for 4 years. What you became the moment your brother disappeared." Her heart stopped, completely stopped, then kick-started with enough force to crack ribs. He knew, not suspected. Knew. "I don't—" "Yes, you do." His hand came up, fingers brushing her jaw with agonizing slowness. The touch was gentle, possessive, terrifying. "I've watched you for 3 months, Kira. I know what you are. Former Delta, current Ghost. DIA burned you when you went rogue to find Jamal. You've been living in my home, moving through my operation, searching for someone." He paused, letting the weight of his knowledge settle on her shoulders like a burial shroud. "Luca Teresi," Dante continued. "The accountant. The man who knows where your brother is. The man who's been moving children like cargo for the Castellano family for 8 years. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "You've been hunting him, and I've been watching you hunt." Kira forced herself to breathe, to think. If you knew, why didn't you kill me? Because you were useful. His smile was sharp as broken glass. Because watching you work was educational. Because I wanted to see how far you'd go, what you'd sacrifice. He turned her to face him, breaking the mirror's spell. And because I wanted to see if you'd trust me when I offered you exactly what you needed. Which is access. Friday night, Luca Teresi will be at that wedding. He'll be moving high-value assets, children, using the wedding as cover. Maximum chaos, maximum distraction. It's the perfect time to relocate inventory before law enforcement closes in. Dante's eyes were amber fire. And your brother is one of those assets. The words hit like a physical blow. How do you know? Because I've been tracking Luca's network for 6 months. Not for justice, not for morality. His voice went colder. For business. Luca represents everything wrong with the old families. Sloppy, cruel, drawing federal attention that threatens my legitimate operations. He's bad for my bottom line. So you want him gone? I want him destroyed. Completely. Publicly. In a way that sends a message to the Castellanos and every other family that still thinks I'm their convenient minority partner. Dante's grip on her chin tightened. I came to this country with nothing. Built an empire through discipline and strategy. Now they expect me to stay in my lane, move their dirty cargo, take their table scraps. His voice dropped to something dangerous. Tomorrow night, I'm showing them what happens when they underestimate an immigrant who's smarter than they are. By bringing me, a black woman, to their sacred wedding. By bringing you, a woman who represents everything they fear. Intelligence. Capability. Someone who doesn't play by their outdated rules. He released her chin, stepped back. You want access to Luca. I want to humiliate the Castellanos. We both get what we need. Kira's mind was racing through implications, calculating angles. What's the catch? You do exactly what I tell you tomorrow night. You trust my plan. You remember that whatever happens, I'm the one who gave you this chance. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small device. Micro earpiece. Felix will be monitoring. If you need extraction, he'll coordinate. She took the earpiece, feeling its weight. 4 years of dead ends, 4 years of cold trails and bureaucratic stonewalling. And now this, a mob boss offering her everything on a silver platter. There's more, she said. There's always more. Dante's smile was genuine this time, almost warm. Smart woman. Yes, there's more. After tomorrow night, after we take down Luca and expose the Castellanos, you disappear. New identity. Clean records. Enough money to take your brother anywhere in the world. He paused. Or you stay. Help me build something better. An organization that uses power to dismantle networks like Luca's instead of profiting from them. You're asking me to become your partner. I'm asking you to stop being a weapon and start being a queen. His eyes were intense. You've spent 4 years hunting. I'm offering you the chance to build, to protect instead of just destroy. Kira studied his face, looking for the lie, the betrayal, the inevitable trap. But all she saw was cold calculation and something else, genuine fury at families who'd treated him like a useful tool instead of an equal. I'll need a weapon, she said finally. At the wedding. You'll have one. Concealed. Only use it if everything fails. He moved toward the door, paused. 6 p.m. tomorrow. The convoy leaves at 7. Get rest. You'll need it. Dante. He turned back. Why are you really helping me? He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, because Nana was right. I do collect broken things, and you're the most beautifully broken thing I've ever seen. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. And because sometimes the best way to destroy your enemies is to give them exactly what they expect, until the moment you don't. He left. Kira stood alone with her reflection, seeing the weapon Dante had described. The dress, the makeup, the transformation from invisible Maid to impossible to ignore presence. She pressed her hand against the cool mirror, feeling the weight of 4 years settling. On her shoulders like a crown made of thorns. Tomorrow night, everything would change. The only question was whether she'd survive the transformation. The convoy was a declaration of war disguised as transportation. 5 black Escalades with bulletproof glass and run-flat tires, flanked by motorcycles whose riders wore no visible insignia but carried enough firepower to level a city block. The kind of security detail that made traffic part like the Red Sea and made cops look the other way, because some battles weren't worth the pension. Kira sat in the center vehicle beside Dante, her hands folded in her lap, the emerald silk pooling around her like liquid wealth. She could feel the weight of the weapon strapped to her inner thigh, a Glock 43X, small enough to be invisible beneath the dress, deadly enough to matter. Dante had watched her check it twice, his expression unreadable. He hadn't spoken since they'd left the penthouse, just sat beside her, one arm draped across the seat back, his fingers occasionally brushing her bare shoulder. Each touch was deliberate, calculated, a reminder that tonight she belonged to him. The micro earpiece was barely noticeable, tucked deep in her ear canal. Felix's voice came through quiet and controlled. All teams in position. Surveillance confirms Luca arrived 40 minutes ago. He's in the main ballroom, east quadrant, near the Castellano family table. Kira's pulse quickened. 4 years. 4 years of hunting, and she was finally close enough to smell him. "Breathe," Dante said quietly, his voice cutting through her tunnel vision. "You go in there looking hungry and they'll know something's wrong. You're arm candy tonight. Beautiful, expensive, unthreatening." His fingers tightened on her shoulder. "Until you're not." The Long Island estate materialized through the tinted windows like something from a Renaissance painting. Cream-colored stone, towering columns wrapped in white roses and Italian lights, fountains that probably cost more than most people's houses, spraying water choreographed to classical music. The circular driveway was already choked with vehicles that represented more money than some country's GDP. Bugattis, Maybachs, a Rolls-Royce Phantom that probably belonged to the Volkov family. But their convoy didn't stop at the valet area where uniformed attendants waited with practiced smiles. "We're going through the main entrance," Dante said, his voice carrying the weight of finality. "I want every eye on us from the moment we arrive. I want them to see exactly what I'm doing and exactly who I'm doing it with." Kira's stomach clenched. "That's asking for violence. That's demanding it." He turned to face her, his amber eyes cold as winter. "The Castellanos need to understand that their old rules are dead, that disrespecting me has consequences, that the immigrant they treated like hired help is now powerful enough to spit in their face at their daughter's wedding." The lead Escalade stopped directly in front of the main entrance, blocking 3 other vehicles. Doors opened. Dante's security fanned out. 8 men in dark suits with visible earpieces and the kind of alert stillness that marked them as former military. Dante stepped out first, buttoning his midnight blue jacket with practiced ease. Then he reached back for her. His hand was warm, strong, possessive in a way that made her skin prickle with warning. She took it, letting him pull her from the vehicle, letting the emerald dress settle around her like armor woven from envy and money. The moment her Louboutin heels touched the stone, shoes Dante had provided, red soles like blood against pale rock, she felt it. The shift in the air, the sudden silence, every head turned. She was a black woman in emerald silk standing beside an Italian-American mob boss at an old-world Mafia wedding. The insult was visual, immediate, undeniable. She represented everything the Castellano-Volkov alliance feared: modernity, diversity, the erosion of their precious bloodline purity. Dante's arm slid around her waist, pulling her against his side with enough force that she felt every hard plane of his body through the thin silk. His touch burned. "Walk," he whispered against her ear, his breath hot. "Let them see what happens when I decide their traditions are meaningless." They moved toward the entrance and the crowd parted. Not willingly, out of shock, out of fury, out of the kind of confused rage that came from having someone violate unspoken rules so flagrantly that violence became the only logical response. Kira kept her chin high, her expression neutral, her training suppressing every instinct to scan for exits, for threats, for Luca's face in the sea of expensive suits and designer gowns. She was arm candy. She was decoration. She was nothing. Until she wasn't. A woman stepped forward, blocking their path with the kind of confidence that came from 40 years of making men kneel. Sofia Castellano, the Don's wife, mother of the bride, draped in ivory lace and diamonds that could fund a small nation's healthcare system. Her hair was silver, swept into an elaborate updo. Her eyes were black ice. Mr. Marcello. Her voice was silk wrapped around razors. How unexpected. Mrs. Castellano. Dante didn't bow, didn't defer, didn't show an ounce of the respect her position demanded. Congratulations on your daughter's wedding. Beautiful venue. Sophia's gaze slid to Kira, and the temperature dropped 20 degrees. Her eyes traveled from Kira's straightened hair to her emerald dress to her red-soled shoes, cataloging every detail with the precision of a jeweler identifying a fake. You brought a guest, Sophia said. The word guest was dipped in acid. I brought my companion, Dante corrected, his voice soft and lethal. Kira, this is Mrs. Castellano. Mrs. Castellano, Kira Okonkwo. The use of her real name, or the name she'd given him, was deliberate, not hiding her, displaying her. Kira extended her hand, knowing it wouldn't be taken. It's an honor, Mrs. Castellano. Your home is stunning. Sophia stared at Kira's hand like it was a snake. Didn't take it. To a family wedding, she said, each word a bullet. You brought staff. I brought someone who matters to me, Dante replied, his smile sharp enough to draw blood. Surely you don't object to that, Mrs. Castellano. This is a celebration of love, after all. The insult beneath the courtesy was unmistakable. Sophia's face tightened into the expression that had terrified soldiers and made politicians reconsider their careers. My husband will want to speak with you, she said, ice dripping from every syllable. Immediately. I'm looking forward to it. Dante's hand never left Kira's waist. They passed into the estate, and Kira's breath caught despite herself. The ballroom was obscene in its opulence. Crystal chandeliers the size of compact cars hung from vaulted ceilings, painted with Renaissance-style frescoes. Marble floors inlaid with gold leaf created geometric patterns that probably cost more per square foot than Manhattan real estate. Tables draped in cream silk held centerpieces of white roses, calla lilies, and peonies flown in from Holland that morning. Everything pristine, everything pure, everything designed to showcase the Castellano-Volkov alliance as old money meeting older money. And in the center of it all, Dante and Kira, darkness and emerald, new money and no apologies. Felix's voice crackled in her ear. You've caused a diplomatic incident. Half the room is on their phones. The other half looks ready to start shooting. Dante guided her to their assigned table, and Kira realized immediately what he'd done. They were positioned strategically, close enough to the main table to be visible, far enough to be dismissible. An insult within an insult, invited but marginalized. As they sat, Kira finally allowed herself to scan the room properly. She cataloged faces with the precision of 4 years' obsession, made men, captains, enforcers, lawyers who specialized in making evidence disappear. The Volkov contingent was easy to identify. Russian, sharp-eyed, wearing suits that cost less but fit better because they expected violence and dressed accordingly. And there, at the head table, sitting beside Don Enzo Castellano himself, Luca the accountant, Teresi. Her breath stopped. He was younger than his file photos suggested, early 40s maybe, handsome in the way of men who understood that appearance was currency, dark hair graying at the temples, cut precisely, suit by Brioni, probably $30,000, wire-rimmed glasses that made him look academic rather than criminal, hands that moved across his phone screen with the delicate precision of a surgeon. He was scanning faces, assessing threats, calculating angles. Then his eyes found hers. For 3 seconds they stared at each other across 50 feet of marble and flowers and old money. Kira saw him try to place her, to understand why Dante Marcello had brought a complete unknown to this gathering. She saw the moment curiosity became calculation. He's looking at you, Dante murmured, his lips against her ear. Luca, he's trying to figure out if you're a message or a threat, or something else entirely. What should I do? Nothing. Let him wonder. Curiosity killed more than cats. It's destroyed entire empires. His hand found hers beneath the table, squeezed once. "Just remember, whatever happens next, you follow my lead. No improvisation, no heroics. You trust that I've planned for everything." Felix's voice? "Bride's procession starting in 2 minutes. Additional security just arrived. Volkov's people, heavily armed. This is about to get complicated." Before Kira could process this, the music swelled. Orchestral, classical, the kind of wedding march that cost 6 figures and came with a conductor flown in from Vienna. The doors at the far end of the ballroom opened. The bridal procession began. Bridesmaids in champagne silk, groomsmen in matching tuxedos, flower girls scattering white rose petals that probably cost $50 each. Then the bride, Elena Castellano, a vision in white lace and Italian tradition. Her face was serene behind her veil, her steps measured and practiced. She was 23, according to the dossier, educated at Vassar, spoke 4 languages, had probably been groomed for this arranged marriage since birth. Behind her, the groom appeared. Captain Mikhail Volkov walked down the aisle in full dress uniform, Russian military, medals gleaming, his posture parade ground perfect. Mid-30s, handsome in a brutal way, eyes that swept the room with the practiced pattern of someone trained to identify threats. Those eyes found Kira and stopped. Kira's world tilted sideways. No, no. Mikhail's face went through a series of micro-expressions too fast for most people to catch. Shock, recognition, calculation, understanding. Then he did something that made the entire ballroom gasp. He stopped walking, mid-aisle, stopped walking toward his bride, toward his future, toward the alliance that had taken 2 years to negotiate. He turned to face Kira directly and saluted. Not a casual gesture, a full military salute, crisp, precise, the kind given to superior officers or heads of state. To her, the ballroom exploded into chaos. Whispers became shouts. Phones came out. Sofia Castellano's face went white with fury. Don Enzo half rose from his seat, his hand moving toward his jacket. Dante's fingers dug into Kira's side hard enough to bruise. "What the hell was that?" Felix's voice in her ear, urgent. "Boss, we need to move. Now. Whatever just happened, it's blown everything." But Kira couldn't hear him, couldn't hear anything over the roaring in her ears, because she knew Mikhail Volkov, not as Mikhail Volkov, as Michael Warren, deep cover FBI, her former partner from the Joint Task Force before she'd gone rogue. The salute was a warning, a message, an abort signal delivered in the only way he could without blowing his own cover completely. She was compromised. The operation was compromised. Everything was about to explode. "I need to leave," she whispered, "right now." "You're not going anywhere." Dante's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. He stood, pulling her up with him, his grip iron. "Smile. We're going to congratulate the happy couple, and you're going to explain to me exactly what's happening before someone starts shooting." The receiving line was a minefield disguised as tradition. Dante's hand never left Kira's waist as they moved through the crowd, a crowd that was no longer pretending civility. Eyes tracked them with naked hostility. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Hands drifted toward jacket pockets where weapons lived. Felix's voice in her ear was rapid-fire Russian, then English. "Boss, I've got movement on the north perimeter. Castellano's people are repositioning. They're preparing for something." Mikhail, Captain Volkov, she had to remember, had to think of him as the groom, stood at the front of the line beside Elena. The bride looked confused, hurt, clearly not understanding why her new husband had just publicly acknowledged a stranger in the middle of their ceremony. As they approached, Kira could see Mikhail's jaw tighten. When he spoke, his voice was pitched for their ears only, carrying a flawless Russian accent that buried any trace of his Nebraska upbringing. "Miss Okonkwo." He made her name sound formal, distant. "I'm surprised to see you here." "Captain Volkov," she replied, matching his formality. "Congratulations on your marriage." "Thank you." His eyes flicked to Dante, then back to her, a warning. "I hope you'll save me a dance later. We have much to discuss about mutual acquaintances." The message was clear. We need to talk. Privately. Now. Elena's hand tightened on Mikhail's arm, her confusion morphing into something sharper. She was no fool. You didn't survive in these families by being oblivious. Misha, she said quietly, using the diminutive. Who is this woman? Before Mikhail could answer, Dante stepped in smoothly. Just someone who reminds the captain of home, I imagine. The world is smaller than we think, Mrs. Volkov. They moved past, continuing through the receiving line, but the damage was done. Behind them, Kira could hear the whispers multiplying like bacteria in a petri dish. Don Enzo Castellano was waiting at the end of the line, a granite monument in an Armani tuxedo, 70 years old, silver hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from Sicilian limestone, eyes that had watched men die and felt nothing. Beside him stood Luca Teresi. Up close, Luca was even more dangerous than his file suggested. The glasses were window dressing. Beneath them, his eyes were predator sharp, constantly calculating. He held a champagne flute in one hand, but Kira noticed he never drank from it. His other hand rested casually in his pocket, probably on a weapon. Marcello. Don Enzo's voice was gravel and old wine. You've made quite the entrance. Don Castellano. Dante's tone was perfectly respectful and completely insincere. Thank you for the invitation. I don't recall extending one to your companion. The pause before companion was deliberate, vicious. Then consider it my gift to your daughter, something memorable for her special day. Dante's smile was a knife wrapped in silk. After all, weddings should be unforgettable. Luca's eyes never left Kira. I don't believe we've been introduced, he said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. Luca Teresi. And you are. This was it. 4 years of hunting, and the man who knew where Jamal was stood 3 feet away, extending his hand like they were at a cocktail party instead of a powder keg with a lit fuse. Kira took his hand. His palm was dry, cool. His grip was firm, but not aggressive. The handshake of a man who understood that violence should be efficient, not emotional. Kira Okonkwo, she said, her voice steady despite her heart trying to punch through her ribs. I work for Mr. Marcello. Work for him. Luca's smile didn't reach his eyes. How interesting. What kind of work? The kind that requires discretion, Dante cut in smoothly. I'm sure you understand, Luca. Some things are better left unspoken at family gatherings. Of course. Luca released Kira's hand, but his eyes stayed locked on hers. Though I have to admit, Miss Okonkwo, you look familiar. Have we met before? Kira's blood turned to ice water. I don't think so. I have one of those faces. Perhaps. He sipped his champagne. No, pretended to sip it. Though I'm very good with faces, especially unusual ones. It's part of my business, remembering people, tracking patterns, identifying anomalies. The threat beneath the courtesy was crystal clear. I'm going to run you through every database I have access to until I figure out who you really are. Don Enzo's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression went from stone to volcanic fury in under a second. Marcello, my office, now! Don Castellano, I wouldn't want to interrupt the celebration. That wasn't a request. Enzo turned and walked toward the mansion's interior, clearly expecting to be followed. Dante looked at Kira. Stay here. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. Felix will keep eyes on you. Dante, trust me. He leaned in, kissing her forehead in a gesture that looked affectionate, but felt like a brand of ownership. Then he was gone, following Enzo into the belly of the estate. Kira stood alone in a ballroom full of people who wanted her dead. Luca was still there, still watching her with those calculating eyes. Fascinating man, Dante Marcello, he said conversationally. Self-made, ambitious, dangerous in unexpected ways. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated. Tell me, Miss Okonkwo, how long have you been working for him? 3 months. And before that? Various positions. I prefer to keep moving. A wanderer. His smile was surgical. Or someone running from something. Which is it? Before she could answer, a hand touched her elbow. Isabella Marcello appearing like a spirit summoned by need. The matriarch's dark eyes were urgent. Excuse us, Mr. Teresi. I need to borrow Miss Okonkwo for a moment. Women's matters. Luca inclined his head graciously, but his eyes promised that this conversation wasn't over. Of course, Mrs. Marcello. I look forward to continuing our discussion later, Miss Okonkwo. Isabella guided Kira away from the crowd, through a side door into a corridor lined with oil paintings of dead Castellanos. The moment they were alone, her grip tightened. "You're in terrible danger, child," she said, her accent thickening with stress. "Luca suspects something. He's already sent your photo to his analysts. And Mikhail's salute. That was a warning, wasn't it? You know him." Kira's mind raced. How much did Isabella know? How much could she risk revealing? Don't lie to me." Isabella's eyes were fierce. "I've spent 40 years watching men play chess with human lives. I know when someone is a pawn versus when they're playing their own game." She pulled out a small device from her clutch, a phone, but modified. "Dante thinks he's controlling this situation. He's not. Luca has been running counterintelligence for 6 months. He knew about your brother before you even applied to work for Dante." The world tilted. What? Jamal Okonkwo, 14 when he was taken, 18 now, premium asset in Luca's network. Isabella's voice was clinical, delivering horror like a weather report. "Luca's been using him as bait, waiting to see who would come looking. You weren't hunting him, child. He was hunting you." Kira's legs went weak. 4 years. 4 years of thinking she was closing in when she was actually walking into an elaborate trap. "Where is he?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Where's Jamal?" "Here, on the estate, in the East Wing, 3rd floor. Luca's keeping high-value assets here during the wedding. Extra security, maximum control." Isabella pressed the modified phone into Kira's hand. "This will bypass the security system for exactly 7 minutes. That's all I can give you." "Why are you helping me?" Isabella's expression was complex. Grief, fury, resignation all at once. "Because I had a brother once. The Castellanos took him from me when I was 16, used him to control my family, to force my marriage to Dante's grandfather." Her eyes glistened. "I've spent 50 years watching these men treat children like inventory. I'm done being complicit." Felix's voice crackled in Kira's ear. "Boss is in trouble. Don Enzo knows something. Multiple armed guards converging on his position. I'm moving to extract, but I need—" The ballroom doors burst open. Sofia Castellano stood in the doorway flanked by 6 armed men in suits. Her face was a mask of controlled fury. "Miss Okonkwo, Don Castellano requests your presence in his office immediately." It wasn't a request. Kira looked at Isabella, who gave the smallest shake of her head. "Don't go. It's a trap." But Dante was already in that office. If she refused, they'd know she was more than she appeared. The charade would shatter. "Of course, Mrs. Castellano," Kira said, her voice steady. "I'd be honored." Isabella's hand squeezed hers once, passing something small and metallic into her palm. A key. "3rd floor," she whispered. "East Wing, 7 minutes. Use them wisely." Kira was escorted through the mansion like a prisoner being led to execution. The guards flanked her, hands near their weapons, ready for her to bolt. Don Enzo's office was on the 2nd floor, all dark wood and leather, the kind of room where decisions were made that altered the trajectory of lives. Dante stood by the window, his expression unreadable. 2 guards stood behind him, weapons visible now, pretense abandoned. Luca was there too, laptop open, his face triumphant. "Miss Okonkwo," Enzo said, gesturing to a chair. "Or should I say, Captain Okonkwo, former Delta Force, former DIA, currently wanted by 3 federal agencies for going rogue." He smiled like a shark. "Imagine my surprise when Mr. Teresi's facial recognition software identified you." Kira didn't sit. Her hand drifted toward her thigh, toward the weapon hidden beneath emerald silk. "I wouldn't," Luca said calmly. "You're outnumbered, outgunned, and standing in a room with no exits." He closed the laptop. "But here's what interests me. Dante knew who you were. He brought you here deliberately, which means this whole performance, the insult, the spectacle, was a distraction." He looked at Dante. "What were you really planning?" Dante's smile was cold. "To watch you destroy yourself with paranoia, to let you waste resources chasing ghosts while I consolidated power, to prove that the old families are so obsessed with tradition that you can't see the future coming until it's already destroyed you." "Poetic," Enzo said. "Also useless. You're both leaving here in body bags. Guards." The lights went out. Complete darkness. Emergency systems should have activated immediately. They didn't. Felix's voice in Kira's ear. "You've got 6 minutes, go!" Chaos erupted, shouting, movement, the sound of weapons being drawn. Kira dropped, rolled, felt a bullet punch through the air where her head had been. Her hand found her Glock, drew it, fired twice toward the muzzle flash, heard someone grunt, fall. Dante's voice in the darkness. "Kira, run, East Wing, 3rd floor, now." She didn't question it, didn't think, just moved. Out the door, into the corridor. The modified phone Isabella had given her glowed with a countdown. 5:47. Behind her, gunfire, screaming. The wedding collapsing into war. But ahead of her, somewhere in this mansion, was Jamal, and she had 5 minutes and 47 seconds to find him before hell arrived. The East Wing was a labyrinth designed by paranoia and old money. Kira sprinted through corridors lined with Renaissance paintings worth millions, her Louboutins abandoned somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd floor. Barefoot now, the Glock 43X in her right hand, Isabella's modified phone in her left showing 4:12. 4 minutes and 12 seconds before the security bypass expired, and every door in this wing locked down with biometric systems she couldn't crack. Felix's voice crackled through the chaos. "Boss is pinned down in the office. Castellano's guards are everywhere. I'm moving to extract, but Kira, you're on your own for this." "Copy," she whispered, her breath coming in controlled gasps. 4 years of cardio training, of running scenarios, of preparing for exactly this moment. The 3rd floor opened into a corridor different from the opulent lower levels. Here, the walls were reinforced concrete painted cream, security cameras every 20 feet, disabled now, blinking red, Isabella's gift buying her invisibility, doors with electronic locks instead of ornate handles. This wasn't guest quarters. This was containment. Her phone's interface showed a floor plan. Isabella had thought of everything, with one room highlighted in red. 3rd door on the left. 3:47. Kira pressed Isabella's key against the electronic lock. It beeped green. The door clicked open. The room was clinical. White walls, a single bed, no windows, a bathroom visible through an open door. And sitting on the bed, wearing clothes too expensive for a prisoner, was a young man who looked like their father. Jamal, 18 now. Taller than when he disappeared, broader in the shoulders. But the eyes, God, the eyes were the same. Dark brown, intelligent, and currently staring at her with an expression that shattered her heart. He didn't look surprised. He looked resigned. "Kira?" he said quietly. His voice had deepened, lost the boyish pitch she remembered. "You shouldn't have come." She crossed the room in 3 strides, her hands reaching for him, needing to confirm he was real. "Jamal, I'm getting you out of here. Right now, I have—" She glanced at the phone. 3 minutes before the security resets. He didn't move, didn't stand, didn't embrace her. "You don't understand," he said. "I can't leave." The words didn't make sense. "What are you talking about? I've spent 4 years finding you. I burned my entire career. I went rogue. I know." His voice was gentle, devastated. "Luke has been showing me the reports. Every move you made, every dead end you chased, every time you got close." He looked down at his hands, hands that trembled slightly. "He used me as bait to lure you here. And it worked." Kira's world fractured. "No, you're coming with me. We're leaving." "Kira." He finally looked at her, and she saw it. The thing Isabella had tried to warn her about. "They didn't just take me, they made me complicit." The room spun. "What does that mean?" "It means for 4 years, I've been learning their business, their networks, their systems." His voice was hollow. "Luca trained me personally. I run logistics now. I coordinate shipments. I know where every asset is, every route, every buyer." He stood finally, and she could see the expensive suit fit him perfectly. "I'm not a victim anymore, Kira. I'm an accountant, just like him." "No." The word was a bullet. "They forced you, coerced you. You were a child. I was 14 when they took me. 18 now. Do you know what happens in 4 years?" His eyes were ancient, destroyed. "You adapt, you survive. You become what they need you to become because the alternative is death. And turns out I wanted to live more than I wanted to stay clean." 2:34. "I don't care." Kira said fiercely, grabbing his arm. "I don't care what you had to do to survive. We're leaving, tonight. I have extraction planned, money, new identities. We can disappear." "Into what?" Jamal pulled away from her. "I know things, Kira. I know routes. I know buyers. I know officials. The moment we run, every family on the East Coast will hunt us. We'll be dead in 6 months. Then we testify. Witness protection. You think witness protection works against these people?" He laughed, bitter and broken. "Luca has federal marshals on his payroll. I've processed the payments myself." An explosion somewhere below rattled the walls. Gunfire, sustained and close. The wedding had become a war zone. Felix's voice. "Kira, Dante's moving to your position. He says don't trust—" Static. "Not what you think." More static. The signal was fracturing. 1:47. "Jamal, I didn't come this far to leave without you." Kira's voice was steel. "Whatever you've done, whatever they made you become, I don't care. You're my brother. We're leaving." "You want to save me?" Jamal's voice cracked. "Then listen. Luca's moving 23 assets tonight. Children, age 8 to 16, using the wedding as cover. There's a convoy scheduled to leave from the East Gate at midnight, 47 minutes from now. Port Elizabeth, container ship called Fortuna Nera." Kira's training kicked in. "How do you know this?" "Because I coordinated it." The admission was a wound. But here's what Luca doesn't know. I kept records. Every shipment, every buyer, every route for 4 years. He pulled out a micro SD card from his pocket. "This is everything. Enough to collapse his entire network, enough to put 36 families in federal prison." He pressed it into her hand. "You want to save me? Save them instead. Get this to the FBI, stop the convoy, let me stay here and feed you intelligence until we can dismantle the entire system." "Absolutely not, Kira." He grabbed her shoulders. "If I leave with you, 23 kids get trafficked tonight and we spend the rest of our lives running. If I stay, I can be your asset inside their operation. I can help you destroy them from within." His eyes were fierce. "Let me turn what they made me into against them." The door burst open. Dante stood in the doorway, blood on his shirt, his Sig Sauer in his hand. Behind him, Felix and 3 of his men. His eyes went from Kira to Jamal, calculating instantly. "We need to move," Dante said. "Castellano's guards are mobilizing. Luca's trying to get the convoy moved up. He knows something's wrong." 0:47. Kira looked at Jamal, at the brother she'd burned 4 years to find, at the young man who'd been broken and rebuilt into something she didn't recognize. "Come with me," she pleaded, "please." "I can't." Jamal's voice was final. "But you can stop him. You have the data. You have time." He looked at Dante. "There's a convoy, East Gate, 23 assets. Can you stop it?" Dante's expression shifted to something calculating. "Yes, but not if we're carrying dead weight." He looked at Kira. "We leave now, or we don't leave at all." The countdown hit 0. The phone's screen went dark. Security systems throughout the wing began rebooting with electronic whirs. "Kira." Jamal pushed her toward the door. "Go, save them. I'll contact you when it's safe. I promise." "I didn't come this far." "Yes, you did. You came this far to stop monsters. So stop them." He smiled, and for a second she saw the 14-year-old boy in the soccer uniform. "I'll be okay. I've survived this long. I can survive longer." Dante grabbed her arm. "Kira, now." She let herself be pulled from the room, her eyes never leaving Jamal until the door closed between them. They ran, through corridors filling with guards, down service stairs Felix somehow knew about, through a kitchen where staff cowered behind industrial stoves, out a side door into gardens illuminated by security lights and muzzle flashes. The convoy was already staging at the East Gate, 3 trucks, heavily armed guards loading cargo that Kira knew in her soul were children who looked like Jamal had at 14. "Felix," Dante barked, "call it in. FBI, state police, anyone who'll respond. Anonymous tip about human trafficking at the Castellano estate." "Boss, that'll bring heat on all of us. Do it, now." Felix made the call while they moved through shadows toward the perimeter wall. Behind them, the mansion was chaos. The wedding transformed into a crime scene, families scrambling, alliances fracturing. They reached the wall. Dante's men had rope already positioned. One by one they climbed while gunfire cracked through the night. At the top, Kira looked back one last time, saw the mansion, saw the convoy beginning to move, saw police lights appearing in the distance, Felix's anonymous tip working faster than expected, saw a figure in a window on the third floor, Jamal, watching her escape. He raised his hand, not a wave, a salute, a promise. They dropped over the wall into darkness. 6 months later, the safe house in Portland was everything Kira had never let herself want. Quiet, clean, windows that opened onto a garden instead of a war zone, coffee that tasted like normal instead of survival. She sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, reviewing the latest encrypted message from her asset inside the Castellano organization. The asset who'd fed her intelligence that had led to 47 arrests, the seizure of 8 trafficking routes, and the collapse of Luca Teresi's network. The asset who signed every message, your brother, surviving. Dante entered from the bedroom, wearing just sweatpants, his chest bare, the bullet scar on his shoulder from that night still pink and healing. He'd survived Don Enzo's retaliation, barely. His organization was rebuilding, restructuring, becoming something different, something cleaner. He poured coffee, read the message over her shoulder. He's asking about next week's shipment intercept, wants to know if we have resources in Baltimore. We do, Kira said. Michael, has FBI assets positioned. We can coordinate. Michael Warren had been extracted from the Volkov family after his cover was blown. Now he ran the FBI task force targeting the remains of the old families. The wedding massacre had given him everything he needed to dismantle empires. Dante's hand rested on her shoulder. You did it, what you set out to do. You found him, saved him. I didn't save him, Kira said quietly. He saved himself, and 23 kids who would have been on that convoy. She looked up at Dante. He saved me too, gave me a purpose bigger than revenge. What do we call what we do now? Dante asked. This war against the old families. Justice. Kira closed the laptop. We call it justice. Outside, rain began to fall on Portland streets. Inside, 2 broken things. A soldier who'd lost her way and a mobster trying to transcend his origins built something new from the ashes of the old world. Somewhere in New York, her brother moved through the darkness, feeding intelligence that would save lives, playing the long game, surviving. Isabella had been right. Some cages had no locks, only keys that looked like choices. And sometimes, the strongest choice was staying inside the cage and using it as a weapon against those who'd built it. Kira picked up her phone, typed a response to Jamal's message. Baltimore resources confirmed. Intercept scheduled. Stay safe, little brother. I'm proud of you. She sent it, closed her eyes, felt Dante's arms wrap around her from behind. You ready for what comes next? He asked. She opened her eyes. Always. Because the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, they were fighting it together. You've just finished a story about sacrifice, redemption, and the long war against darkness. If this resonated with you, if you felt every moment of Kira's journey, drop a like and share this with someone who needs to hear a story about never giving up on the people you love. Comment below which moment hit you hardest. Was it the salute? The brother's choice? The final message? Your engagement keeps these stories alive. Subscribe for more tales that explore the gray spaces between hero and villain, between revenge and justice, between what we lose and what we become. Until next time, remember, some weapons are built from broken things, and sometimes the most powerful choice is the one nobody sees coming.